Imagine walking through the golden gates of Topkapi Palace at midnight. The moonlight glints off tiled domes, incense drifts in the air, and behind walls guarded by eunuchs lies the most forbidden place in the Ottoman Empire, the Sultan's imperial harem. But this is no simple sanctuary of beauty and pleasure, it is a labyrinth of rules. Here, hundreds of women lived in a world where every glance, every whisper, and every breath was controlled, from the way they bathed to the way they dressed to the very order in which they were allowed to lie beside the Sultan. Every act was dictated by tradition, superstition, and politics. The harem was a kingdom within a kingdom, a place where desire and fear collided. Women were trained from childhood in music, poetry, and seduction, yet forbidden to love freely. Eunuchs, men stripped of manhood, patrolled the corridors, enforcing rules so strict that even a stolen smile could cost a concubine her life. What happened in those rooms shaped empires. Wars were waged and thrones overturned because of what unfolded in candlelit chambers where one man ruled, but many women plotted. The Sultan's bed was not just a place of intimacy, it was a throne of blood and silk, where power and survival were decided by strange, sometimes brutal, rules. This is not the story of romance, this is the story of control. The bizarre bedroom rules of the Sultan's imperial harem, secrets whispered behind locked doors. If you enjoy hidden truths like this, hit subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're watching from, because tonight we step inside the forbidden. To understand the strange laws of the harem, we first need to strip away the myths. In the West, the harem was long imagined as an exotic fantasy, endless women lounging on cushions waiting for a sultan's command. But the truth was far more complex. The Ottoman harem, especially during its golden age between the 15th and 17th centuries, was a political machine. It was not just about the Sultan's desires, it was about controlling succession, ensuring loyalty, and protecting the empire from betrayal. Every rule inside was designed to guard one man's power and the dynasty's survival. At the heart of this hidden world was the Sultan himself, the shadow of God on earth. His power was absolute, yet his vulnerability lay in the bedroom, because whoever controlled his bed could influence his heart, his decisions, and even the future heir to the throne. The women of the harem were not all equal. At the bottom were the carriers, young slave girls, often taken from Christian lands through conquest or tribute. They were trained in manners, dance, embroidery, and song. If they pleased, they might rise in rank, but if they displeased, they were cast aside. Above them were the gozdes, the favourites, who had caught the Sultan's eye at least once. A step higher were the Iqbals, the fortunate ones who had shared the Sultan's bed and pleased him enough to be remembered. Higher still were the Khadans, official consorts with titles, privileges, and sometimes children. But above them all stood the Hurrem Sultan, the Sultan's chief consort, often the mother of his favoured son, and at the very pinnacle was the Valide Sultan, the Sultan's mother, who wielded immense power behind the scenes. But within this hierarchy, bizarre rules reigned supreme. A concubine could not simply decide to be with the Sultan. Every intimate encounter was scheduled, monitored, and carefully prepared. Eunuchs would escort the chosen woman through hidden corridors at night, her body washed, perfumed, and adorned according to strict ritual. She was forbidden to speak out of turn, forbidden to initiate, forbidden to disobey the unspoken choreography of the Sultan's desires. Even the Sultan's freedom was bound by ritual. He could not simply call for any woman at any time. The Valide Sultan, his mother, often approved or influenced his choices. Because intimacy was not just about pleasure, it was about producing heirs. And with multiple princes came a deadly problem: succession wars. So a rule emerged: no sultan would have children with more than one woman. This strange tradition, known as the one mother, one son policy, was designed to prevent brothers from slaughtering each other in bloody civil wars, but it also meant that a single concubine's womb could decide the empire's future. The palace walls echoed with whispers. Every concubine dreamed of rising, of bearing the Sultan's child, of becoming queen mother, but only a few would ever touch the Sultan's hand and even fewer his bed. For those who failed, the harem became a cage of fading beauty. For those who succeeded, it became a battlefield of influence. Behind the silk curtains of Topkapi, passion was shackled by politics, and the bedroom rules, bizarre, strict, and sometimes cruel, ensured that every encounter was more than just a night of desire. It was a move on a chessboard that spanned continents. And yet, as with every cage, there were those who learned to bend the bars, women who turned rules into weapons, concubines who transformed silken sheets into thrones. This is where the story begins to rise. The rise of the imperial harem's influence can be traced to one extraordinary woman, Hurrem Sultan, better known in the West as Roxolana. Born around 1502 in what is now Ukraine, Hurrem was captured by Crimean Tatars and sold into slavery. She entered the harem of Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, one of the most powerful rulers in Ottoman history. She began as just another carrier, a nameless girl among hundreds, but she was anything but ordinary. Hurrem quickly caught Suleiman's eye. Attention, not just for her beauty, but for her wit and intelligence. In a world where concubines were forbidden from marrying the Sultan, Hurrem broke the rules. Suleiman freed her, married her, and raised her to the status of Hurrem Sultan. This act shocked the court, the empire, and even foreign diplomats. With her marriage, Hurrem shattered centuries of tradition. No longer was she a concubine destined to fade when her youth passed. She became Suleiman's partner in both bed and statecraft. Letters between them reveal not just passion, but political counsel. Hurrem used her position to secure her children's futures and to shape imperial policy. But her rise was not without enemies. Other concubines once favored were cast aside. Rival factions within the palace seethed with jealousy. The Valide Sultan, Suleiman's mother, resented Hurrem's power, yet Hurrem mastered the harem's bizarre rules, bending them to her advantage. Where others saw cages, she saw ladders. Her influence set a precedent. For the next century, women of the harem, mothers, favorites, wives, would shape the empire in what became known as the Sultanate of Women. But with this rise came a turning point, when the rules meant to control passion became tools of betrayal, manipulation, and death. The turning point in the story of the Sultan's harem came with the realization that the bedroom was not just a place of pleasure, it was a throne of knives. Hurrem Sultan, in securing her own position, also secured the downfall of her rivals. Suleiman had a son, Mustafa, by another concubine. Mustafa was beloved by the army and widely considered the rightful heir. But Hurrem feared that if Mustafa rose to power, her own children would be executed, as was the brutal custom of the Ottomans to prevent civil war. So she moved with cunning precision. Through letters, whispers, and alliances with palace officials, Hurrem spread rumors of Mustafa's disloyalty. She painted him as a traitor, plotting against his father. The harem's walls became weapons, its rules of secrecy the perfect cover for intrigue. The bizarre rules of intimacy now intertwined with the fate of empires. A concubine's word in the Sultan's ear could mean life or death for a prince. When Suleiman was finally convinced of Mustafa's supposed betrayal, he summoned his son. In a chilling scene, guards strangled Mustafa with a silk cord, bloodless, silent, in accordance with Ottoman custom. The execution was carried out within the camp, before the eyes of soldiers who adored him. They wept, but they did not resist. This moment shattered the illusion of the harem as merely a place of beauty. It was revealed for what it truly was, a crucible of power, where bizarre rules masked deadly stakes. Hurrem's children survived. Her son Selim eventually took the throne, but the precedent had been set. From then on, the harem was no longer just a hidden world, it was the empire's beating heart of intrigue. The bedroom rules, once designed to control passion, now became weapons in games of betrayal. Who the Sultan lay with, who bore his children, who was allowed into his chamber, all were matters of state, and behind every silk curtain lurked the possibility of blood. The empire itself was now entangled in the strange, suffocating rules of the Sultan's bed, and from this turning point came consequences darker than anyone could have imagined. The dark consequences of the Sultan's harem unfolded over centuries, and they were as bizarre as they were brutal. By the 17th century, the rules of succession and the politics of the bedroom had created a cycle of paranoia. Sultans, fearing their brothers would rise against them, ordered mass executions of siblings. Princes, once raised in luxury, were strangled in their sleep with silk cords. The harem's rules about one mother, one son could not prevent the bloodshed, it only delayed it. Inside the harem, concubines plotted endlessly. To secure their children's futures, they poisoned won rivals, bribed eunuchs, and staged elaborate traps. The Sultan's bed became a battlefield where every embrace was a potential betrayal. Women who failed to bear sons lived in quiet despair, their lives reduced to waiting in gilded cages. The bizarre rituals of intimacy grew more rigid. Concubines were inspected, bathed, and perfumed like sacred objects. The Sultan's encounters were timed and often watched over by eunuchs to ensure no breach of protocol. Desire itself became mechanical, smothered by rules meant to protect the dynasty, yet beneath the surface, jealousy and fear simmered. For the empire, these dark consequences were disastrous. Sultans who grew up within the suffocating confines of the harem emerged sheltered, inexperienced, and often paranoid. Some were manipulated by their mothers or consorts, becoming mere shadows of rulers. Others drowned themselves in indulgence, retreating into the silken prison rather than facing the chaos of the outside world. The people of the empire paid the price. Corruption spread, armies faltered, provinces slipped away. While wars raged at the borders, the palace obsessed over bedroom rules and harem intrigues. The once mighty Ottoman Empire began to rot from within, and still, behind the locked doors of Topkapi, the bizarre rules continued. Silk cords tightened around necks, poison seeped into cups, whispers spread like fire through corridors lined with gold. The harem, meant to protect the Sultan's power, had become its own cage, a place where the empire's strength withered in shadows. When the Ottoman Empire finally collapsed in the early 20th century, the harem dissolved with it. The women were freed, the eunuchs dismissed, and the forbidden chambers of Topkapi Palace became a museum. Tourists now wander the same corridors where concubines once schemed and where sultans whispered in candlelight, but the echoes remain. The bizarre bedroom rules of the harem were more than curiosities. They were instruments of power, tools of control, and engines of fear. They shaped not only the private lives of sultans and concubines, but the fate of an empire that once spanned 3 continents. For the women, the aftermath was silence. Many were buried without names, remembered only in the margins of chronicles. Others lived long enough to see their children rise or fall on thrones built from silk and blood. Their lives were sacrifices to a system that valued them not as people but as instruments of dynasty. The lesson is not about exotic fantasy. It is about how power twists intimacy into politics, how rules meant to preserve order can instead create cages. The harem shows us that even the most private acts, love, desire, family, can be weaponized when power is absolute. Today, when we step into Topkapi Palace and gaze at its gilded ceilings, it is easy to be dazzled by the beauty. But if you listen closely, beneath the gold and marble, you can almost hear the whispers of concubines, the footsteps of eunuchs, the cries of princes led to execution. The palace is not just a monument of splendor, it is a mausoleum of secrets. And perhaps the strangest truth of all, the empire's greatest weakness was not always on the battlefield, but in the bedroom. The bizarre rules of the sultan's harem, meant to control desire, ended up consuming the empire itself. So the next time you hear of Ottoman glory, remember the shadows, remember the women who lived and died by rules they never chose, and remember that power, when locked in silken chambers, always finds ways to destroy itself. Subscribe for more, share this story, and tell me in the comments what shocked you most.